Last Monday, June 5th, 2023, the UFO UAP community was fairly surprised, shocked might be a better word, by a fascinating revelation published in the Debrief and written by journalists Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. These are the two journalists who had previously written several major UFO-related articles over the last few years for the New York Times. And what did their new article say? Only that there is now a new UFO whistleblower with some major bombshell-level statements. This man's name is David Grusch. He is a former intelligence official and decorated combat officer who has provided Congress and the Intelligence Community Inspector General with extensive classified information about covert programs possessing retrieved craft of, wait for it, non-human origin. This man served in the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA, and even more so, the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO, which is probably the most famous ultra-secret spy agency in the United States since the early 1960s. He was part of the UAP task force from 2019 to 2021. So what did this man say? He stated that the United States government, its allies, and defense contractors have recovered partial fragments and intact vehicles of non-human origin, and that they've done this for decades. Just let that sink in. He stated furthermore that the analysis that was done on them, and there was very specific, sophisticated analysis, suggested that these are exotic because of their unique atomic arrangements, their radiological signatures, and material science testing results. That's very sophisticated testing indeed. He also stated that in 2021, certain information about UAPs were being withheld illegally from Congress, intentionally and illegally, which prevented proper oversight. Not only that, he ended up filing a complaint which alleged illegal retaliation against him because he made these statements. So he goes through proper channels, states that this information had been withheld from Congress, and as a result of that, they went after him. He got attorney support and whistleblower protection and apparently won his complaint. But really what we're seeing is that elements of the Pentagon went after him for his statements. He also talked about, this is really quite interesting, and this is definitely something that Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal made very clear, is the reality of a decades-long, previously or publicly unknown Cold War for the recovery and exploitation of these materials, of this physical material from UAP or UFOs, crash landings, or crashes and landings, I guess we could say, in order to gain national defense advantages. This is something that folks in the research community have discussed for years as a certainty, as a probability, and here he is, David Grusch, making that statement as well. Grusch left government employment just a couple of months ago, April of 2023, to promote government accountability through public awareness. And he's had a lot of people in the intel community who have vouched for his credibility. So that's what we are talking about. Serious implications of this. Number one is that we're talking about potential confirmation of non-human intelligence here on planet Earth. That goes without saying. But another implication is the existence of advanced technologies. Leslie and Ralph talked about this a lot in their article. The potential for technologies implicit in these exotic captured findings and so forth to help our own society, our own civilization. In fact, in the article, I think they quoted Gary Nolan, Dr. Gary Nolan, at great length to that end. That's always been an interest to those of us who've been following this subject, and here they are bringing it up again. Definite national security implications in the article. Basically, when you're talking about a covert arms race internationally to gain asymmetric defense advantages, that's national security implications big time. They didn't mention Russia, they didn't mention China in the article. I think that's the implication. And we'll just leave that, we'll put a pin in that and come back to it. A lot of other implications in here. And I just want to point out, what I'm giving you here is just a bare bones introduction. what's going to follow are clips from the last weekend when my wife Tracy and I were at the probably the largest UFO conference in the country, Contact in the Desert, out in Palm Springs, California. We were just expecting this to be a standard big UFO event. There were several thousand people in attendance, and during the very final day was when this bombshell news item hit us all. So you're going to see clips that follow. In fact, we're going to see the beginning of my own final lecture. I gave 3 that weekend, and this is Monday morning, and Tracy took some video. You'll see me up there talking about this breaking news. Kind of an interesting little behind the scenes picture of a UFO event where there's breaking UFO news. So on that basis, it's a little bit of history in the background there. We really have to wonder a couple of things going on here. Are we looking at a, slow motion disclosure? And if so, you have to wonder, is the stage being set for an acknowledgement of UFO or UAP even further, even aliens, but with the government setting the stage for the need to maintain further secrecy in order to maintain national security? The reason I say that is that one of the statements in the article from the Debrief, which I'll have linked below, was a statement by Jonathan Gray. He's an intelligence officer with the National Air and Space Intelligence Center. He apparently specializes in UAP analysis. He said something that really struck me as wasn't really sure how I wanted to respond to it. I wasn't sure that I liked it. Talked about the archaic and preposterous notion, in his view, that the United States has been the sole culprit responsible for the international UFO cover-up. What I would say is that the United States has been the single major player. Yes, the Russians, yes, the Chinese, but when you're talking about other nations, most of them are under the control, or at least under significant domination of the United States. And so I do think it is fair to look at the United States as the primary player in what we can call the international UFO cover-up. So I didn't like that he's calling it archaic and preposterous. To me, that sounded like a lot of propaganda. In the clip that follows, you'll hear me quoting him from the article, so I won't go through that whole thing here. But this is one reason I'm wondering if we're seeing the military, the Pentagon, trying to set the stage to just remind the public, like, yes, we're going to give you some information, but we also need to keep our secrets. Just a new way to maintain control over the narrative. I do think that is what we're going to be seeing. For example, are we really going to see any ultimate discussion of these beings that presumably are responsible for the UAP phenomenon, aliens, if that's what we're talking about? As in, do we have bodies, dead or alive? Will we ever, in this public conversation on UAP, ever really engage in a mature discussion of current worldwide sightings, which go on every day, every week, every year around the world? It's very important. Something important is happening. We never discuss this. It's important. Do we have any idea of who these beings are, what they are doing, or will this all be ignored and dismissed? I believe that this article does validate the claim that what we have been seeing, especially since 2017 onward, has been in terms of the opening up of the UAP conversation and so forth, has been reflective of a factional battle or struggle from within the Pentagon and the intelligence community. I have believed this almost from the beginning, that we're looking at factions essentially duking it out with each other. You have one faction that essentially has no interest in any UFO, UAP disclosure. You have another faction, I would say, that has some interest in disclosure, but still retains allegiance to traditional security concerns and is not in favor of full UFO disclosure. There's a lot of establishment people involved in this, and that's, I think, what we're really dealing with. And I I believe, I mean, this is what has happened throughout history when you're looking at factional struggles at high levels, and I think that's what we're seeing here. So again, what's about to follow, you're going to see a mostly intact news account of this story as it was delivered live during my lecture at Contact in the Desert. My wife Tracy shot it. Did a nice job, I got to say, and you're going to get to see the whole thing as it unfolds. We were able to stream that right into my lecture at the conference, and I would say it's kind of a interesting thing to be able to catch such a potentially important story as it was seen at probably the leading UFO conference of the year. So you can feel the excitement that many people in the audience felt. Following that, you will see a short clip of myself with attorney Danny Sheehan, where we are just beginning to discuss the implications of what this all may represent. All of this was off the cuff, just initial impressions. We had quite a lot of Q&A during this session, most of which is not included here, but we did include an extended comment from one member of the audience, namely the legendary researcher Linda Moulton Howe. She had a lot to say about this. You will not want to miss that. That's toward the end. So, a snippet of a potentially historically important moment. Will this be the bombshell that a lot of the folks in the UFO field felt it was on that day? We will have to see. I was not so sure. I mean, to me, it was a significant thing. I'm never one. I don't want people to count the chickens before they hatch, so to speak. We'll have to see. So far, as of this recording, there hasn't been much in the way of mainstream or establishment reaction. Very little as far as I can see. No comment from any important political figure, hardly anything in the media. That may change. We'll have to just see. I have to say this doesn't surprise me, though. I think what we are seeing, again, is the ongoing playing out of a factional battle, not just players from within the national security state, but among its allies and partners in the major media. I think we need to be looking now at how the strategies will develop among both sides of the struggle, and I do think it's a struggle. Keep something else in mind. While one faction appears to be dead set against any forward movement in our public discussion on this, again, as I said earlier, I don't think it's accurate to say that the other side is all for full disclosure. I just don't think so. I think these folks strike me as loyal members of the establishment, but who believe in some greater level of openness that is now warranted. I think that's their position. And I think they still do believe in some secrets, maybe to a small extent, maybe to a large extent. Probably depends on who you talk to. So now here's one of the last things I'll leave you with before we jump to this clips. Why might some people want some disclosure about UFOs, but not the whole thing? Why? Well, we need to hear them tell us why, but there's always one possibility. Perhaps it's time, they may think, that some of this hitherto hidden technology can be made public and monetized. I mean, think about it. The UFO secret's been going on in full force for over 80 years at a minimum. That's a long time. And meanwhile, our civilization has gone through a massive revolution in terms of our own technology and our infrastructure. And I have no doubt that there are powerful players behind the scenes who are seeing opportunities that are ripe for exploitation. There are potentially many industries and players who can profit from UFO tech. You got aviation and aerospace for sure, but really anything that can utilize breakthroughs in material science, energy production or energy utilization, or any number of other sciences and applications. There is a lot going on beneath the surface of the UFO subject, always has been.
Very important articles for the New York Times over the last few years. No, this is for the Debrief, which is has turned in the last few years a very important UFO-related news site, as you could say. They do some very good work over there. And just as a little background, I recall discussing this with either Leslie or Ralph. I think Leslie, and it definitely had the impression that they felt they had gone as far as they were going to be allowed to go with the New York Times. Things like metamaterials or whatever else is going on with that. My first lecture here, I think, what's missing in our UAP conversation, spent a little time talking about the Battelle Memorial Institute, which I was saying is one of the most advanced metallurgical places in the world, where they've got the most leading experts. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that work was being done over at Battelle. But anyway, let's keep going here. He stated, well, attested in his testimony that in 2021, so he was in the UAP task force of 2019 to 2021, that in 2021, he actually made the complaint that critical information on UAP was being withheld illegally from Congress on purpose, preventing proper oversight. So after 2 years on the committee, he decided that there were shenanigans, cover-up going on, and he issued a complaint. As a result of that, he was subjected to what he calls illegal retaliation against him, essentially as a whistleblower. We can call him that. I think it's fair to call him a whistleblower in this instance. And as a result of his statement in 2021, was subjected to measures against him. I don't know the specific measures. Personally, professionally, it's not clear, but the hammer came down on him. And so that was his situation for the last couple of years. He also stated there has been a decades-long unknown or publicly unknown Cold War. What about? About the recovery and exploitation of these UFOs, crash and acquired tech, in order to gain military advantages. No surprise there. Something we probably, many of us have talked about. I've talked about. He only 2 months ago left U.S. government employment. So he was a government employee up until April 2023. He sounds a bit like Lou Elizondo in a way. He left the government, he said, to promote government accountability through public awareness. Yeah, and in the article, in Leslie and Ralph's article here, they actually bring out a number of very, very high-level individuals who have vouched for this man's credibility. So he's not just a lone guy twisting out in the wind. He has got a lot of support from apparently highly respected individuals, and so there's that. And one of the things that Leslie and Ralph wrote here, and I guess this is true, is they said that his case can be seen as a test. A test for what? Well, for them, a test for the effectiveness of the new whistleblower protections that have just recently been established, as many of you know, through the last NDAA, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and that whole thing. And I guess that's really true. And, you know, excuse me, you know, if we can see how this whole thing's playing out, you can see this as a victory for the Whistleblower Protection Act. If it turns out that way, it looks promising. Let me discuss some of the implications of this article. These are implications explicitly implicit, if I can say that, in the article itself. And then I'm going to go on and talk about some of my own thoughts here. But out of the article, I think that some of the main takeaways that Leslie and Ralph are asking us to have. A, I'm putting potential confirmation of non-human intelligence. It's kind of a big thing. I mean, what do we mean by confirmation? Well, that can be debated, I suppose, but I'm starting to wonder if we're getting to a bit of a tipping point here in the amount of evidence that is being brought forth. It's always tricky to try to analyze absolutely new breaking news. I mean, this is the same morning, and you know, I don't want to go overboard here necessarily, but I would say this is potentially a very significant development. We'll just have to see where it goes. Another implication deals with advanced technologies, and by that I simply mean they're talking in here. They quoted Dr. Gary Nolan, for example, and I think probably a lot of you may have been familiar with Gary's interview from just, I think, 2 weeks ago. A very important interview indeed, where he's discussing, you know, yes, 100% certainty that ET had been here, and he said, you know, we really could use some of this technology to maybe fix a few things in this world, and he made a very strong statement for that. And that comes through in this article as well. So you get this idea that, you know, there's some very advanced technology. It has clearly, or at least evidently, been withheld from us for a long time. Again, this is stuff that we've talked about for years in our community. And let's see, you know, if maybe we can get access to it for the betterment of our society and so forth. So that's another definite implication in this article. Another implication, and this one I'm going to come back to because I find this one particularly intriguing and a little almost questionable. This is where I'm going to take a little issue here. But they talk about the national security implications. And really there's a big suggestion in this article. And I'm afraid that of all the things in here, this is the one that may get overlooked the most as moving forward. We'll have to see. But the implication is that, you know, nations have been competing. They don't say Russia, they don't say China, they don't say any other nation, in fact, but I think that seems to be the implication. So there's been this international competition in this covert arms race to gain what they call asymmetric defense advantages. And the thing that I'm going to come back to that, but just, it does seem that they're promoting a little bit of a Cold War kind of element to this disclosure with that type of statement. And it may be true. It may be true, but we're going to come back to that in a minute. Another implication is the whole whistleblower protection thing, dealing with government transparency, accountability. And I think rightly so, their article does say, like, look, this is an important development also. This is a test for us in our society in having proper accountability and transparency in this very important process of disclosure. I mean, maybe we can use that word in this case, disclosure, sure. And there are a couple of statements in that article dealing with, how do we put this? Preparing the public for more truths about aliens or extraterrestrials or whatever these beings are. You really get the impression, I'm sure some of you have read this article already, and if you haven't, you very likely will, there's definitely this a bit of a tease going on indicating there's more to come. And are we on a track here now for a genuine opening up of some serious truths? You know, things started off about five and a half years ago, and I think most of us would say they slowed down and maybe even stalled to some extent. Maybe they didn't completely stall. So, but now I think we're seeing potential forward motion on all of that. So, a couple of other issues here. Now, one of the individuals quoted in this article was a man named Jonathan Gray. I'd never heard of him before. He is an intelligence officer. They said he specializes in UAP analysis at the National Air and Space Intelligence Center. That is a significant agency, of course. A couple of things he said I didn't like. I'll just be honest about it. He mentioned the so-called archaic and preposterous notion that the United States has been solely responsible for the UFO cover-up. And he used those two words. And I thought, you know what? The U.S. has dominated its allies for a long, long time and has preponderant influence over most of the world. I don't think it's archaic. I don't think it's preposterous. But it was interesting that he said it, and it was interesting that it made it into this article. I'm going to read this quote of his, of Jonathan Gray. He says, and he's very like pro UFOs are real. Like he does say that, but listen carefully to this. He says, though a tough nut to crack, potential technological advancements may be gleaned from non-human intelligence / UAP retrievals by any sufficiently advanced nation and then used to wage asymmetrical warfare. So, therefore, some secrecy must remain. I underline that. However, it is no longer necessary to continue to deny that these advanced technologies derived from non-human intelligence exist at all, or to deny that these technologies have landed, crashed, or fallen into the hands of human beings. And by the way, it just occurred to me this second, that last statement, landed, crashed, or fallen into the hands. That's very, very much like in the words of Eric Davis from a couple of years ago. If you recall, back in 2019, Lou Elizondo did a piece on Tucker Carlson at the time. It was, I think, May 31st, 2019. It was a hell of an interview. And at the very end of it, it was just a 5-minute piece, Carlson asked Elizondo, have any of these, I think he said aircraft, come into our possession? But he obviously meant UFOs. And Elizondo stumbled a little bit because it was, he says, well, Tucker, I've got my NDA, which prohibits me from getting into this. And Carlson was ready to walk away from it, leave it alone. And then Elizondo said, but actually, Tucker, yes, they have. And that was at the end of the interview. It was amazing. So in the aftermath of that, a friend of mine and a great guy on YouTube, James Ian Dolan, who has a YouTube channel called Engaging the Phenomenon, he was in touch with with Eric Davis. And so he's writing to Davis, and this is when Davis was just instant messaging people back and forth all the time. Ian Dolan says, so what's up with this? Is this accurate? And on and on. And Davis, going off memory here, but Davis said, Elizondo's statement about UFOs having crashed is 1,000% true. But then he amended that to say, crashed, landed, or otherwise come into our possession, or something like that. So in other words, Davis amended the original thing to use wording very similar to what I'm seeing here by Jonathan Gray. I think that's interesting because they're saying it's not just crash retrievals. There's more than that, and that's interesting, isn't it? Like, how else did we get these things? They crashed, we got some of those. He's saying landed here. Is that a gift? What is the story behind that? Or fallen into the hands of human beings, however that vaguely means. So I just leave that out there. But the important thing, I guess, that I would just want to emphasize here is this idea where he starts off by saying, look, this is still significant national security, so we're going to still have some secrecy on this. And he's, it's not a difficult case to make, but I'm just pointing out, this is, this is a shift in the whole process. So I have a couple of questions here. Are we looking at slow motion disclosure? If we are, by slow motion disclosure, when I wrote After Disclosure with Bryce Zabel 13 years ago, we did not see slow motion disclosure happening. We saw avalanche. We saw avalanche happening. Of course, we wrote that book in 2010. It was a different world, a different situation, and we just thought, if this comes out even a little bit, it's going to go just like a big thing, and it'll be this unstoppable force, this tidal wave. And we haven't been seeing that. We've been seeing this very slow kind of a drip with a very controlled media. The reason we thought avalanche back in 2010, though, was because we were looking at the internet as it existed at that time. And the internet really changed a lot from 2010 to 2015, like big time, and then onward. It's much more centrally controlled, as we all know. So, so now we're seeing this more controlled process. But anyway, I'm saying here, perhaps the stage is being set for an acknowledgement of UFO or UAP or even aliens, but with the government setting the stage for the need to maintain secrecy in order to maintain national security. They're definitely putting that proviso out there. It's just like a little placeholder for us to keep in mind. Yeah, we may do a little bit of a process here, but we still have to keep our secrets. So, again, I'm not saying it's not understandable, but I'm just saying they are doing everything they can to maintain control over this process. I am waiting for, I'm sure you are waiting for, any ultimate discussion of the aliens themselves. Is that going to happen? For example, do we have bodies? Are there bodies? None of this has come up yet. I would wait, and I'm not expecting this, but maybe it can happen, a discussion of the massive number of current UFO sightings. Let's not forget that. You know, here we are, we're talking about a couple of Navy encounters with UAP, UFOs. We're talking now about this whole thing. But there's a UFO phenomenon, or UAP phenomenon, every single day around the world. What is that all about? I do think that's important, and at some point, it seems to me, that needs to be integrated into the broader discussion. I talked about this a lot in my first lecture, what's missing in our UAP discussion. I'm waiting for a discussion of whether we have an idea of who they are, what they are doing. These are important ideas, or will this just be ignored? Will this be dismissed due to, you know, the idea being archaic or preposterous or being affecting national security? I don't know. My final point on this, or at least for now, is that you know, for the last 5+ years, there's been a very significant debate in this community of ours over what is happening with all the TTSA stuff and the revelations coming out of the news. Is this CIA disinfo, PSYOP, or not, and what? And I have, for nearly the whole time, maintained that what we have been seeing is a battle of factions within the national security structure. And I feel that this current news validates that position. So I think you're seeing a struggle within the Pentagon and within the intelligence community. One faction, I would say, has no interest in any kind of disclosure whatsoever. And that has been the most powerful faction for 80 years. I think there's no question about that. The other faction, Mellon, Elizondo, David Grusch, you know, all of that, those people, they collectively have some interest in disclosure, and maybe some of them have a very strong interest in disclosure. You know, they're not all the same, but collectively they certainly have some. But I would, my observation is that they still have a strong allegiance to, you know, the traditional national security establishment system that's out there. And so I don't really think that they're all in favor of a full, complete disclosure of the UAP, UFO situation. That's the impression I get. I think those are the, is that everything I have here? Yeah, so, yeah, this is what all I put together this morning, so I didn't really have any more than that. But I think this probably gives a reasonable overview of the article, my at least initial take on it. There's much more, I'm sure, that can be said and that will be said on it, including by myself. So, you know what would be good? Before I get into, I really wondered how much of my next lecture, my main lecture, I can discuss, but what I would be happy to do, at least for a little while, is open it up for some Q&A. If anyone would like, we can go back and forth and see how far.
Top secret military program that has reportedly found wreckage of fully intact UFOs. The government now calls them UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. For years, there have been whispers and rumors that the government had aircraft of non-human origin. This report is the first evidence it might be true. The Inspector General has called Grusch's complaint urgent and credible. Tonight, we have a World Television exclusive interview with the whistleblower in which he claims we not only have the aircraft, but the government has been keeping much of its secret from Congress and from the public. News Nation senior national correspondent Brian Enton is here with the story, and this is a blockbuster.
It is a blockbuster. It's really hard to wrap your mind around this. I've been working on this for the past couple of weeks. I'm still having a hard time processing all of it. All over the last couple of years, it sort of became mainstream to discuss UFOs. The government has released videos. They've acknowledged that we don't know what some of this stuff is out there that we have on camera, but this really takes it all to another level. For the very first time, the world is about to hear from a former high-level U.S. intelligence officer who says the government has some of the unidentified craft in its possession. He is revealing these exclusive details about the secret government program.
We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow.
We have all seen these blurry videos of unidentified flying objects. Video evidence, if you will, that old tales of UFOs may not all be conspiracy theories. In recent years, Congress starting an official U.S. government unidentified aerial phenomenon task force. recently renamed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARROW. And now in a News Nation exclusive, David Grusch, an Air Force veteran, former member of that task force, and veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, is formally blowing the whistle on secrets he says no one has ever shared publicly before.
You are one of the most trusted former intelligence officials in the US defense and intelligence establishment.
Yes, I was.
You were trusted with the most intimate secrets.
Yes.
Grusch sitting down with award-winning investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, who's reporting for News Nation and has spent years reporting on the UFO question.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me they were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on their oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that there was in fact a program that the UAP task force was not read into.
Grusch alleges the U.S. government has recovered non-human craft for decades. He's filed a whistleblower complaint saying he gave what he calls the classified proof to Congress and the Intelligence Community Inspector General. News Nation has confirmed David Grusch's credentials and resume. We've not seen or verified the alleged proof he says he's provided to investigators. He says he can't show us the proof for national security reasons. He also tells us he's not seen photos of the alleged craft himself, but has talked extensively with other intelligence officials who have.
If you're right, if you're telling us the truth, everyone, the entire American public, has been lied to for decades.
Yeah, there's a sophisticated disinformation campaign targeting the U.S. populace, which is extremely unethical and immoral.
You are saying to the human race, for the first time, an official intelligence representative at a high level from the US government is saying publicly, we are not alone.
We're definitely not alone. Absolutely, the data points empirically that we're not alone, yeah.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of?
Well, naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true.
It's also harder for people to wrap their minds around the concept of a crashed object from somewhere else. It's easier to accept that, yeah, we see things in the sky that we can't explain.
Journalist Leslie Kean broke Grusch's whistleblower story this morning in the Debrief. Ms. Kean's career has been mainstream and credible, having written a series of reports on UFOs in the New York Times dating back to 2017. He has the credentials, but there's no documents that he's handed over. There's no pictures. And as a journalist, you want to see documents, you want to see pictures. Does that raise a red flag?
Not at all, Brian. I mean, you mean documents that actually describe the craft?
Correct, yeah, like documents, or to be able to see it for ourselves.
Of course, don't we all want that? And the problem with that is all of that information is classified. As we said in the story, everything that Grusch told Congress and told the Inspector General of both the IC, the Intelligence Community Inspector General, and the Department of Defense Inspector General, all of that information is classified.
In 2017, Kean reported exclusively in the New York Times that the Pentagon had a secret UFO program. 3 years later, the Pentagon confirmed her story. Her latest report is even more explosive, but Kean says she has multiple sources who back up Grusch's story.
I believe it because of all the sources I have who have told me the same thing. So who am I to doubt these very, very high-level people who have been inside these programs for decades, have done their work, and are all telling me the same thing? I mean, I don't think there's some kind of a conspiracy among all these people who don't know each other. to make something like this up.
So I've got to be blunt about this. You're not making this up. This is not a lie.
No, absolutely not.
Because everybody watching this right now is looking at your face. They're going, is this guy for real?
I am for real. And I'm sitting here at great personal risk and obvious professional risk by talking to you today.
And just within the last 10 minutes or so, the Pentagon has released a statement to News Nation about this report. They say to date, AARO has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. AARO is committed to following the data and its investigation wherever it leads. AARO, working with the Office of the General Counsel and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, has established a safe and secure process for individuals to come forward with information to aid AARO in its congressionally mandated historical review. AARO's historical review of records and testimonies is ongoing and due to Congress by June 2024, and AARO welcomes the opportunity to speak with any former or current employee or contractor who believes they have information relevant to this historical review. And Elizabeth, we know that David Grusch has filed that whistleblower complaint. He's been on the record under oath testifying to many of these things that he said in our report tonight.
Right, and it's important to point out that this statement from the Pentagon from AARO, Grusch is alleging that this top secret program is keeping it a secret from AARO. So.
Yeah, exactly. And if Grusch is, what he's saying is true, the spokespeople, all of those folks at that level wouldn't even know this was going on anyway.
All right, I gotta ask you, he has a compelling story to tell. Very little of it seems like firsthand knowledge. Isn't he just repeating what somebody else has told him or somebody else has showed him?
Yes, that is what he's doing, but he says he's talked to a number of people who are in very, very high level positions. He also had basically the highest level of classified material information that he was able to receive. We went back and checked over, his history, all of his credentials. Check out completely. Unfortunately,
in addition, a couple people have come forward publicly to vouch for him, people who are high ranking.
They have, and this article first came out this morning, and I think it's interesting that, there hasn't been any sort of effort to discredit what he has said, either from the Defense Department.
So interesting. So what happens, and have we had any reaction, by the way, from members of Congress who have been taking this seriously in the last couple of years? We've seen congressional hearings, we've seen NASA's hearing just about a week ago on UFOs or UAPs, whatever you prefer to call them. We've seen the DNI give a briefing to the White House on this. We've been hearing whispers and rumors for years. I remember even former President Trump, when he was in office, sort of saying, oh my gosh, if you knew what I knew about UFO.
Yeah.
So there's always been this intrigue.
There has, and think about it, Elizabeth, if you go back 15 or 20 years, if we were sitting here talking about UFOs, people would think that we were nutty. Now it's gotten to the level of where it is somewhat accepted because the government has come forward to a certain extent and acknowledged that there are these videos that exist. The Navy has released the videos themselves and said, we're not sure exactly what this is that we're seeing. Of course, what Grusch is saying really just sort of takes it to the next level.
Boy, it sure does. It's almost impossible to believe. All right, Brian Nenton, thanks so much. And former Navy fighter pilot Lieutenant Ryan Graves joins us now. He was the first active duty pilot to testify before Congress about his squadron's experience with UAPs. He also founded Americans for Safe Aerospace to encourage other pilots to come forward. Lieutenant Graves, always great to have you on the show. First, just your reaction to what we've just heard.
Yeah, quite the incredible statements that were made public today. David has had a lot of experience and he's made some pretty strong statements. My understanding is that this has been properly communicated to Congress and other stakeholders in government, and so that really puts the onus now on Congress to be able to move this information forward, hopefully to the American people.
The whistleblower complaint alleges that not only has our government had these craft of, quote, non-human origin, but that it's keeping it secret. And for decades, the Air Force discredited sightings of UAPs by pilots like you. Does it sound possible to you that that kind of secrecy is still happening, this kind of disinformation, this time around aircraft?
Well, that just seems to be the case. I've been reporting on unidentified objects since 2014 and 2015 off of the coast of Virginia Beach. And still, that conversation hasn't elevated to the point where pilots still feel comfortable reporting. So yes, I still believe that there is secrecy and stigma associated with this topic, and this conversation that we're having today, I think, is a massive step in the right direction.
Can you describe exactly what you saw when you were flying in the air that night?
Certainly. We were seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of clear spheres, and we were seeing these all over our working areas on a near daily basis. Sometimes coming as close as 500 feet to our aircraft as we were flying our operations. We were seeing this not only off the eastern seaboard, but we were seeing this down south off Jacksonville, Florida, as well as off the west coast. Now with the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office reporting that we're seeing spheres globally that are proceeding from 0 to 2 Mach on a regular basis, we still haven't really figured out what those objects are.
And you, largely to your efforts and a few others, and people are now speaking out, pilots are now speaking out, but in general, especially a couple of years ago, but you say even now still to a certain extent, what are pilots told when they come back and say, oh my God, look at what I saw and what I recorded in my cockpit camera?
Yeah, a lot of times it doesn't even get to that point, unfortunately, Elizabeth. Pilots are taking it back to their companies, to their safety offices and reporting this. Typically what I'm hearing from aircrew that are calling and reporting is that they're seeing objects, they're typically reporting it to air traffic control, and that's really where the conversation ends. There'll be a number of other aircraft that will report the same thing in the same vicinity, but there's no further action taken.
But
it was a bit disappointing to hear the
Go ahead.
Hear the FAA chief talk. It was a little disappointing to hear the FAA representative at the latest public meeting that the NASA independent study team had stated that he was only familiar with maybe 4 or 5 reports of UAP from their FAA controllers. I'm personally hearing reports from pilots that they're seeing objects on almost a nightly basis off the Northern Pacific as well as Northern Atlantic.
Almost a nightly
and that's
basis?
been happening for several months. Yes.
Okay, if these non-human craft are in fact flying around the Earth on almost a nightly basis, would it make sense to you that one or more of these would crash or land?
Well, that's the assumption that we have to make if David's story is 100% true. If these objects are flying around, that have been for a number of years, the assumption would be that they would likely crash at some point and that there would be an operation to retrieve it.
A former staff director of the Senate Intelligence Committee is publicly calling on the government to reveal what it has. He says he's spoken to 4 witnesses who say the same thing that you do, that Grusch said.
Crew that moved a mountain to make this happen. To make this all happen, that was just unbelievable. Thank you guys. And
we just got this morning that I've been in conversation with them during the morning, and we've been in conversation for a number of weeks actually. That Dave actually went to the Senate Intelligence Committee and gave them this information from the 4th, 5th, and 6th of April. And then I'm not at liberty to talk about the details of this, but let me say, I knew this as of the 10th of April. And that this effort to try to get it put forward is part of what, how many of you were at the panel the other night? The disclosure panel that we had, that we began talking about this at that time. That there was this effort on the part of some people inside the highest levels of government to get this information out. And there was a pushback. Susan Gao, the quote, the big long quote you saw from them saying that they have no evidence that there's ever been any kind of craft recovered. So, I mean, that's just a flat lie. And that's consistent with the program that they've had in place for like 75 years. It was like Oliver North in the Iran-Contra case when he just flat lied to Congress and said that no, there was no evidence whatsoever that we were secretly shipping weapons to the Contras, and he flat out lied under oath to Congress. And then when he got caught on it, that we actually, our office, the Romero Institute, that runs the New Paradigm project that we're working on here about all this, that when we got that exposed and the special prosecutor was appointed and dragged Oliver North in front of the Congress, he just said, well, sure, I lied to you. It was a covert program. You're not entitled to it. Like the executive branch is like the government, they think. Whereas the Congress of the United States, who we elect, is the government. So what you see here, you see live here today, Susan Gao from the Pentagon and the executive branch lying, saying that they have no evidence whatsoever about this. But you've got David Grusch now asserting not only the details of it, but he's provided to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence hundreds of pages of previously and still classified documents showing the details of this type of a program.
I just want to point out, this is a really good point you're making, that this is a battle, on one level, a battle between these two branches of government, where Congress has been really pushed to the side for such a long time, and with the growth of such executive power. But it is, I think, totally legit to see this in part as a battle between Congress and the executive.
It's a struggle, and for example, during the Iran-Contra case, when they were confronted about what they were doing, that Congress had passed a law totally prohibiting the executive branch, Defense Department, and any intelligence agencies from providing any military assistance to the Contras, the former authoritarian fascist government down in Nicaragua that had been deposed and were caught by the international courts mining the harbors of them, which was a violation of international law, and they were declared international criminals. That government fell and went into exile, and the Congress passed a law, the Dolan Amendment, explicitly and emphatically prohibiting the Defense Department and any intelligence agencies, the executive branch, from providing any assistance to them. And when we caught them doing it and put them under oath, what Oliver North said is, well, wait a second, the Congress may have the authority to decide to control the purse strings of providing funds, but if we in the executive branch can get money somewhere else, we can do whatever we want. We can mount any kind of foreign policy that we want to. All they do is control the funding. And so that they went to the Brunei. They went to the Sultan of Brunei to get millions of dollars, and then just undertook an operation of their own. That's sort of what we see happening here, that the executive branch has been engaged in this kind of super covert program now for decades, and they've been lying flat out to Congress, and they're still lying to Congress. And so this is what you've seen live here today in this 15 minutes that we've all witnessed together real time, is what we've been talking about here all weekend. But it's happened right here, live today.
Totally unexpected. Ruins my morning. I have no plan. I think I gotta wonder how Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick feels right now. He's like, those bastards sold me out. I mean, he really must feel pretty bad. After what he just said, no evidence of anything anomalous and so forth, and here we go with this.
It's not all that clear that he's been trying that hard. That's one of the.
And that's not yet a matter of discussion. Maybe in time it will be.
Well, that's the question here, is that what are going to be the ripple effects of this information?
Right.
And many people believe that once the Pentagon had to acknowledge that UFOs were real and that they weren't swamp gas or a misidentified flock of birds or something, that this moment that we're sharing here together was going to be inevitable. That somebody was going to say, wait a second, if they're flying all around here and they're real, has anybody ever recovered one of these things? And of course, that's what's happened now. Now that they've said this, they're gonna, if they kick the tires and pound on David Grusch, all they're gonna find is absolute truth. This guy's telling the absolute truth. He's got the documented proof to show it. He knows the names of the people that have got all the first-hand information, and he's providing it to them.
There's another question over here, Matt. You gotta wonder, what's the strategy of those who want to push this forward going to be? What are the likely things that the other side is going to do? There's some other hands coming up here. Should we, someone else want to just jump up?
Linda.
Is that Linda?
Yes.
Hey!
I wonder if, in addition to the internecine warfare that has been going on between JSOC, Arrow, and several offices in the Pentagon, as I have been told for several months, that one of the things that they are trying to accomplish is to keep animal mutilations by ETs, human abductions by ETs, hybridization by ETs. They want it all to be wrapped up over here while watch the pretty balls and lights and gleams, and let's keep our contact with ETs here.
Totally agree.
My own conviction is that that is a mistake. That if we are finally going to be at the decade in the century where the government of the United States is finally going to break through its lies since World War II, that it better do all of the difficult subjects. Because what I see, and I've been trying to get to the bottom of all of this for 44 years, we now are in a country in which the vast majority of people, including myself, I do not trust the government of the United States. But the reason I don't trust is that they had so many opportunities to tell the truth that would have opened up many things that they think are impossible to open up, but they are opening up anyway. And that the headlines today are going to make the door easier for everyone in all facets to now start being interviewed. Wouldn't this be the perfect time to say, we apologize, United States. We have kept this secret in respect for you as humans in a government that is supposed to be of, by, and for the people. And we didn't think you could handle it. But if they go forward now with exactly what you guys were pointing to, if this degenerates into Arrow, you stay here, NRO, you're gonna take over, and everything in between is then going to be, you cannot talk unless you have permission. Because that's where this today feels like. This was a great beginning. But if they don't continue with honest opening up everything, Trappist, from what I understand, I've been told for a year, we have been to the Trappist solar system. We know that Webb has evidence of artificial frequencies in planet E in the TRAPPIST-1 system. Artificial frequencies is what we generate in cities at night on Earth. If they try to have their cake and eat it too, open up a little bit about the possibility of artificial light on TRAPPIST, and they don't tell the whole story of how many solar systems we have been to with the help of the tall whites and the Nordics, we're going to be entering into a schizophrenic stage again of people who will be allowed to tell this truth, but God help you, me. Animal mutilations are a part of this. Human abductions are a part of this. Hybridization is a part of this. And I'm not trying to overtake the time here, and I apologize.
No, you're perfect. You're saying the exactly, I completely agree with you.
Well, and if we don't get what seems to be honest, professional truth about what the government knows about hybridization, about animal mutilations, about the fact that all around this planet, some with agreements with the government, that there are non-humans who are based on this planet, have been based on this planet for millions of years, throughout our solar system and many solar systems. In other words, is this going to be reality finally opening up?
Yeah,
or is it going to be a whole other Broadway production, in which we are only going to be allowed to see this moving ball and this moving ball. Because I love you guys, and I think that humanity deserves the whole truth, not these pieces that are selected because a government or governments, they're terrified that we are going to collapse on the sidewalk. It's crazy. We need truth, and I'm sorry, I talked too long. But
Linda, you were absolutely perfect. Thank you. I just want to add and put on. I've thought for years there's disclosure, but then there's 1,000 layers of disclosure. It's like you can be the president and say, yes, there are aliens here, and then walk out of the room and say, I'm going on vacation for 6 months. But there are 1,000 additional questions, including exactly what you're saying. So when we disclose, the answer is how much is being disclosed? What actually is the full, deep truth of everything that is happening, including mutilations, including abductions, and everything else? And or is it simply a matter of the other side playing defense and moving a little bit further down the field, but they're still holding the line on everything else?
One last thing. Animal mutilations have been going on for decades. Hybridization, all of it. We are still on the planet while all of that is going on. They are not attacking Homo sapiens sapiens. It's been very clear. It is not an attack on Homo sapiens sapiens.
But we can ask, what are they doing?
What is their end goal, and could we then collaborate in communication, especially with the tall whites, which I understand they have a vested interest. And it's like, don't have this be a phony disclosure.
This is exactly.
Thank you, Linda.
This is exactly.
Well, that's it for now. Much more to say about this in the coming weeks and beyond. I don't want to make major predictions. Let's take this slowly, carefully, not get ahead of ourselves. There's still a great deal we need to learn. Lots of specifics continue to elude us. Maybe there will be others to follow, other revelations, other people we will have to see. For now, I think the UFO community should take these allegations very seriously, and let's see if this can be leveraged into further disclosures about the explosive nature of the genuine UFO cover-up, something I've been talking about for a long, long time. And you know, before me, many, many others. So yes, we are talking about recovered alien tech and bodies. The implications are endless. Expect to hear me coming back to this theme many more times in the coming weeks and months. That's it for now. Let's keep fighting the good fight. Later.